Now that Warno has finally released in full, this video will summarize the game in a brief too long didn't read overview before delving into the detail of the new dynamic campaigns and the map editor. This video assumes you have a decent idea of how Warno plays already, so for those that haven't played it before, please check out my full review video first, which will provide the much needed context to follow this video, the link for which will be in the description below for ease of reference. Set in 1989, you can either choose an historically accurate battle group from a variety of NATO members, the Soviets or East Germany, or you can craft your own battle group using various infantry squads, tanks, and planes from that time period. You can fight against real opponents or AI in a skirmish mode that can be 1v1 or even 10v10, or there are story-based missions in an alternate history, Cold War gone hot scenario. And now there are multiple huge Army General campaigns set on a strategic map with the option to auto-resolve or take part in RTS battles. However you play it, a game of Warno is not about building an economy or researching technologies. It's about tactfully deploying an initial chunk of your combined arms battle group at the start of a match before rushing to capture points, then reinforcing where appropriate as your command points tick up over time. So if you enjoy intense RTS battles, combined arms warfare, having a detailed knowledge of a wide range of units, and an 80s mullet, then Warno might be your cup of tea. So what's new now that Warno has seen its 1.0 release? The Army General campaigns are easily the main feature. So what are they, and what do they like to play? Army General is a dynamic campaign of sorts. If you've played Steel Division 2, you'll have a decent idea of what to expect, but there are some key differences. For those of you that haven't played a Eugen Systems game before, it's similar in some ways to a Total War campaign, with an overworld map and RTS battles when you don't like the look of the auto-resolve prediction, but you don't build any buildings, and you can't even create new units. You get what you're given, often starting midway through a fight, with some units already fatigued, and so there is a major emphasis on rotation and preserving what you have, both on the overworld map and in the RTS battles. Army General in Warno can be played online against real opponents, in co-op, and against the AI, which has seen some improvements from the Steel Division 2 Army General AI, as it can actually attack more than one unit in a turn. Each of the Army General campaigns take place in a Cold War gone hot scenario, where the Soviet Union has invaded Germany at the Fulda Gap. Taking place between days 1 and 7 of the invasion, the campaigns vary significantly in length, from maybe a few hours to several days' worth of gameplay, depending on how many battles you choose to auto-resolve. And in some of these scenarios, you have over 100 divisions to command, each made up of historically accurate battalions that can be mixed and matched before going into an RTS battle. You can play as either NATO or the Pact, and although you can't spawn new units as such, you do get reinforcements, especially as NATO, several turns into the game, so there's an element of holding out long enough until reinforcements arrive. Each unit has a number of action points which varies depending on the unit type. Action points are used to move, attack, and defend, as signified by the blue preview squares around the unit. Moving to one of the light blue squares means that unit will have enough action points left to either attack on this turn or defend against an enemy attack in the enemy's next turn. However, straying into the darker blue squares means that unit can neither attack or defend until their next turn. You'll notice that units can travel further down roads than they can through forests, as harder to navigate terrain costs more action points to move through. Each unit has a zone of control around it, which is generally only one square away from their position. Most units need to move next to this zone of control in order to actually attack that unit, almost like it's a melee attack, whereas artillery and air defense systems work more on a ranged attack basis, with helicopters able to ignore the effects of terrain on their movement, and jets hang around the edge of the map with no real restriction on their range. When you attack a unit, or defend from an attack yourself, you can call in nearby units for support. This is a numbers game, as each unit has an attack number and a defense number. Starting with the attacker's attack number and the defender's defense number, you can add the attack and defense numbers of nearby units to determine not just who will win that battle, but by how much. For each battle, you are restricted to 2 main combat battalions, such as armoured or mechanized divisions, along with 1 auxiliary division, such as an HQ or reconnaissance division, along with artillery support and air support. Whether you even have those available will depend on how you've already positioned your units. Therein lies the game, and whether you even want to use them will depend on how comfortably you can win the engagements without them, or whether you want to sacrifice that battle for the greater good. Even with a comfortable victory, your unit's attack and defense values will permanently decrease, and there's also a fatigue mechanic that builds after each engagement, so effective rotation is key. Fatigue does automatically recover 1 point each turn. That unit does nothing, but when fatigue reaches 6 for that unit, they become disorganized. Disorganized units effectively become useless and will be totally destroyed, no matter their defense value, if they are attacked again and have no support from friendly units. So even the toughest unit can be neutralized if you attack it several times in a row to disorganize them, provided they are isolated from their friends. Otherwise, units will be destroyed when they take more than 70% losses, or their retreat after losing a battle has been prevented. Each tile can increase a unit's defensive points depending on that tile's terrain. There are 4 types. A plain offers 0% increase to defense, a forest adds 10%, a semi-urban tile adds 20%, and an urban tile increases that unit's defense by 30%. So when defending, which you'll be doing a lot as NATO, you'll want to cluster your defenders on as many urban tiles as possible, ensuring major cities are always the main focal points of the Soviet attacks. Using combined arms in each battle will yield combat bonuses, but beware that although anti-air and artillery units have an area of effect, the anti-air unit takes 1 turn to be deployed, and artillery can't move more than a couple of squares and still be able to attack or defend that turn, placing greater emphasis on prior placement for those units. If you encircle an enemy unit, you cut off their supply, which means they cannot recover fatigue. Attempting an encirclement is genuinely fun, but the AI doesn't really attempt to do it from my experience, which is a shame. A side wins Army General by either reaching their victory objective point first, or having the most points after the final turn of the campaign. You earn victory points by capturing objectives, and also each turn based on the number of objectives in your zone of influence. NATO receives 1 point per enemy battalion destroyed, whereas the Warsaw Pact earns 2 points per battalion destroyed. Apparently, this reflects the historical strength and number of each side's battalions. And a final quick point that when playing against a real opponent, you can still auto-resolve, but both players have to agree to it. Overall, the Army General campaigns add a lot of content to a game that already had its fair share, especially for those who enjoy a good RTS skirmish. Ultimately, the mechanics of these campaigns aren't as deep as many would like, but you can't argue with the sheer scale of these campaigns and the level of detail in the divisions themselves, and the fact that you can basically zoom out so far as to see a big chunk of a whole country, then zoom in to see individual flowers. It's rather impressive, I must say. The other major chunk of content that comes with the 1.0 release of Warno is the detailed map editor, which I must confess I don't really understand how to operate, but from the developer's own videos, I think you'll agree. It's plenty detailed, and will certainly interest those looking to craft their own maps. In terms of DLC, you'll notice there's an early access pack which contains 5 new divisions. It's free to those who already owned the game during early access, and can be purchased by everybody else. Is it really worth it? Not really in my opinion, but check out the actual divisions available and see if they happen to float your boat, I guess. There's also a 200-page digital guide, but honestly, I'm not sure why anyone would buy that. There is also the Gold Deluxe edition of Warno on the horizon, which was meant to be released on day 1, but has been delayed due to issues with the Steam page. Once this is up and running, this will be a rather pricey version of the game that will give you access to the bloody ebook, but also future DLCs, which will contain new Army General campaigns, along with new operations and many new divisions. It's actually quite a lot of content, but you'll be waiting a while for these DLCs to actually be released. Though early access adopters of Warno will receive a discount on the Gold Edition, so look out for that when the time comes. It's also worth mentioning the Nemesis mini DLC series, which is a concept the developer introduced in Steel Division 2. Basically, the community vote on which division they would like to be included in the game next, and then a mini DLC is released with that division. It's not exactly a lot of content, so I wouldn't get too excited. So the real question we must ask ourselves is whether Warno is now finally a better deal than its predecessor, Red Dragon, and can it compete with the upcoming Broken Arrow? Everyone, of course, is entitled to their own opinion, but with the chunky and shiny new Army General campaigns, I am certain that more and more gamers will feel that Warno is finally worth moving to from Red Dragon. Long live the mighty Red Dragon, it's not going anywhere, but Warno honestly looks like it has a decent amount of content now, and I'm sure there will be a sale or two in the near future to sweeten the deal. Now, obviously, comparing to Broken Arrow is more difficult as that game hasn't even released yet, but there have been previews for us to test, so we can at least venture an opinion. Both games appear to be strong offerings, which is ultimately great for gamers in general, but whether one will be better than the other, from what I've seen so far, that is simply too close to call at the moment. They have their differences, of course, but in my personal opinion, I'm simply looking forward to being able to play both. They both look great. I appreciate that's a bit of a cop-out, but it's genuinely how I feel about it. Finally, before I sign off, I wanted to part with a final recommendation. If you do end up purchasing and enjoying Warno, I highly recommend you check out the YouTube channel SD League. Now, I don't know this person or anything. We've commented on each other's videos a bit in the past, I guess. They seem nice. But honestly, there are a lot of channels jumping on the Warno bandwagon right now, but SD League is the real deal. Dedicated to Warno, they organize tournaments, they get a shout out from the developers in their blogs. If you enjoy Warno, I highly recommend checking out their channel, which I'll link in the description below. And I predict after watching a few videos, you will end up subscribing. That's enough from me. Let me know what you think about Warno and Broken Arrow and Red Dragon. I'm interested to hear your opinions, constructive ones, of course. And I'll see you in the next one.